Welcome to the Emergent Human, where we explore optimizing health, embodied spirituality, and post-conventional living. I'm Michael Ostrolenk, a therapist, coach, and educator, and I'm your host. Today's show is brought to you by Christos Galanis, an amazing body worker in the Northern Virginia area, who has integrated different somatic practices into his work, including rolfing. You can learn more about his work at ChristosGalanis.com. Today's guest is Christos Galanis, who is an interdisciplinary artist and human geographer who has spent the past 15 years or so tracking and making visible the various spells through which colonialism, human supremacy, and narcissism inhabit and inhibit relationships, both individually and culturally. His currently launched business, Kairos, which we'll be discussing today, helps clients to integrate more meaning and beauty into their lives through individualized ceremonies and rituals. In addition to his academic publishing, lecturing, and ethnographic field work, he also brings years of experience teaching workshops on walking, play, performance, kink, and eco-sexuality. A practicing animist, he is a graduate of Stephen Jenkinson's Orphan Wisdom School and is completing a PhD from the University of Edinburgh. Hello, Christos.
Morning, Michael. Good to be with you. That was just Mosey, the dog that I'm house sitting, coming in. I don't know if the audience heard that.
That's
He's
awesome.
joining us.
Dogs allowed, as you know.
Yeah, I do.
I invited you for these purposes to just talk about the work that you do, helping people make sacred moments in their lives, ceremonies, rituals, rites of passages, which is so needed, and unfortunately I don't see much of in the world, especially here in the States. So I want to hear like more about what you do and what you offer to people. But what is it in your life that kind of led you on this path to see the sacredness of everyday life, the importance of certain events in people's lives, to look out your window and just be in awe of life around you?
Yeah, I guess it's almost like there's two tracks going on with me. One is literally like a academic study of reality and history, kind of trying to figure out where we are and how we got here. And so I think, as you mentioned in the intro, I'm trying to finish up. I'm writing up a PhD out of the University of Edinburgh, and I ended up kind of doing a study of the history of Western culture, going back to pre-Christian days, and trying to figure out almost like the politics of reality, the politics of how we understand what exists and doesn't exist. And through that, it's become apparent to me that there's been a long-term kind of political, I don't want to say battle, agenda to have us believe that I'd say we're all alone and humans are the only, beings with full consciousness. And once you really look at the history, you can really see the history of almost like terrorism against, let's say, pagan peoples, all around the world. And I would say around against animists, people that believe that all beings have spirit, all beings have agency. So in that way, it was a very rational, kind of logical study of our history. And on the other side, I mean, it just comes down to, in my early 20s, I had, what some people might describe as a nervous breakdown. I had 2 years of really, really rough time, couldn't get out of bed. And up to that point, I was a hardcore atheist. I was dressed all in black for years and years, total goth, hated, I associated spirituality with religion, with the church. I didn't have any experience of anything other than the Greek Orthodox church that I grew up in the Catholic school I went to for high school. And then there was one night I was reading, I think it's The Holographic Universe. Do you know that? I forget the author's name. It's the idea of
yeah quantum physicist kind of guy.
Yeah, and I was reading that along with all kinds of other kind of things on quantum physics and things like that. And it was 5 a.m, not that far from what time I woke up this morning. And at that point, I mean, I was in a really rough spot in my life. And I remember reading this book and just as the first rays of the sun came out, it's almost like I became aware of this tape loop that had been going on in the background of my mind my whole life. And it was asking the question. The question was, do you believe in God? And my automatic response was just no. Do you believe in God? No. Do you believe in God? No. And it's almost like this track had been playing for about 22 or 23 years straight without really being aware of it. And then almost as gentle as just like a flower, opening on the morning that it finally opens for the first time. That tape loop became, do you believe in God? No. Do you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in God? Yes. And it was just literally that simple. There was nothing that I did. And right at that moment, the sun started streaming in the morning, and I just started laughing and crying at the same time so deeply. And everything changed for me, and it was just becoming aware. And when I say God, I mean, at that point, I didn't have other words or ways to explain it, what God means. I could go on for a while, but now about what I would say, the divine means to me. But it was a moment of grace. I think I'd put it that way, so it's like this track of like academic, intense learning and research, but then at the same time, just this absolute moment of grace and something transforming in me without knowing that such a thing was possible.
Take me on the path from that moment of grace to launching Kairos, the path that led you to launch Kairos, and want to help people along those lines.
Yeah, so probably like you, I've spent much of my life trying to, understand myself, understand humanity, understand culture, trying to understand how to live a good life, and also how to nourish life, nourish my community, nourish my relationships, right? So I've looked into a lot of different things, Buddhism, Hinduism. I've done all the different, everything but Christianity for a long time. Although I've even found lots of treasures in that tradition. But again, it was kind of in response to another dark period a couple of years ago, where I ended up getting chronic Lyme disease and got quite ill, and kind of hit a dark place where not much had any meaning anymore. I really didn't know why I was here. I had been very steeped in, academia and very critical thinking, kind of looking at what was wrong with the world, describing it, the way that you're trained to, for the most part, at least in the humanities and academia. And I'd say probably in the past year, part of it, with your friendship and support, trying to figure out, all right, like, why am I actually here? What can I do that's perhaps different than, writing more academic papers, pointing out things that are wrong in the world? Because there's a lot of that already, and I can do it well. But how do I put it? I mean, we'll talk about it more, what I'm launching, but I've always had this particular relationship with time that I've realized is probably a little bit different than most people, in that I always kind of have a sense of many, many moving pieces and the way that they align and the way that they need to come together. And I have, for whatever reason, the capacity to intuit like the appropriate time for things to happen, whether that's an ending, whether that's the beginning of something, whether that's a transition. Decently for my own life, but probably even better for other people's when I'm not involved. You know how that is. It's a lot of murkiness when it's about your own life. But it was the strong desire to give back, give back to life, capital L life, and to create beauty, which I think is actually very, I wouldn't say unique, but it's a fundamental capacity in humans and humanity, to create beauty. Beauty is an offering, beauty is an expression of awe and wonder for life. Beauty is giving thanks. I mean, just if you ever just watch, virtuoso musicians, for example, I mean, just there's really nothing else like that in the universe, what we have the capacity for. And I think beyond just, doing that myself as a longtime artist, it's a desire to bring that more into the world and to support other people who maybe, haven't grown up with such traditions or capacities. And I think anyone can do anything. Like there's so many ways to create beauty through ritual, through rites of passage.
Let's before
But I
you give
think
some
that, yeah,
examples, of like how people might come to you for certain ceremonies or rituals. I know you talk about time in two different ways. Kairos is the name of your project there, but
yeah,
can you differentiate Kairos and the other type of time and why you chose Kairos?
sure, yeah. So I grew up speaking Greek. Both my parents are from Greece. I grew up in Toronto, Canada. Hated being Greek, hated having to go to Greek school all my childhood, but eventually by my 20s kind of found my own way because it's a very, I don't know, something about diasporic cultures, their desire to kind of hold on to tradition makes it very sclerotic, and it's very hard to evolve, I would say. But now I'm deeply thankful that I, speak Greek and learn Greek, and so in Greek we have actually three different words for time or concepts of time. The first is Chronos, or yeah, CHRONSNOS, which I would describe as linear time. Like the time of making appointments for meetings and things like that. The days of the week, the time that most of us pretty much have to operate in order to function. Then there's also Aion, AION, which would translate as eternal time or
Mm,
eternity time. And then there's Kairos or Kairos, depending how you want to pronounce it. And that's translated as the appropriate time, or I would say ceremonial time. And that's the sense of time, for example, when you and your partner are, living together for several years and you're feeling into when it might feel appropriate to get married or to have a child. And that feeling, which, you know, I don't know how other people experience it, but there's something seems to me about like things aligning in a way.
mm,
And then you just know, right? You can't go back. Like it's just, okay, something happens. So that would be Kairos. It's like
mm,
when things align in the appropriate way. When I say appropriate, my sense is like when things are alignment with capital L, life itself,
yeah,
and I think
yeah.
we can feel when we're kind of, closer to being in that balance versus when we're way out there. And
Now,
my, I just finished just on that sense of Kairos.
please.
Different message. And we have lost that for the most part. And I almost feel like it makes us insane to be stuck in linear time all the time. So when I say like I use time as medicine or temporality as medicine, it's that concept. It's like returning us, not even returning us, but shifting us back into a sense of time that's more about being in alignment with all the systems, rather than just the calendar or the clock, which, are human constructs, which are fine, but
So
it's
I,
not the
I,
same
w-
thing.
I would imagine like synchronicities kind of fit well with what you're talking about in terms of the alignment, universal
Absolutely.
alignment, and sort of multiversal lines in certain ways. Yeah,
And I don't know, I think people more or less tend to take really big cues from synchronicities, right?
yeah,
All of a sudden something shows up 3 times at the same time in a week, and you're like, oh shit, I need
pay
to be
attention.
looking at that, right?
Yeah,
So that's the idea of like timing, right? Because that's not on the calendar. It's not saying like, become a Buddhist when you're 27 years old, like it's alignments and things like that. And I don't think we understand time very well, we don't study it, we don't think about it, we don't talk about it. And I never thought there was anything unusual about my experience of it until, I started getting older and studying, let's say, other cultures, especially, and realizing, oh, like I have this relationship with time that is not that usual in this culture.
So is it, as we apply that way of being in the world of time, is it when you do your Kairos work, is that you help individuals or couples or families both feel into the right timing to do a recognized transition or ceremony for something going on in their life or ritual, and then what that actually looks like, oh, like here's all the possibilities, it collapses it into this moment, and how do we create the ceremony around it? Is that kind of what you do?
Yeah, I think it's almost like if you have to imagine it, there's one context where it's like initiating things, right? Like catalyzing things, beginning things. So that might be, is it time to leave my job or career and launch this thing that I've dreamed of, right? And how do you know it's time? And once you know it's time, other than, talking to your boss and resigning and then making a website, like that's the practical, again, almost like the linear part of it. But how do you inhabit that, that transition, that transformation? And to me, that's through, again, ceremony or ritual, some way that you use, physical materials in your space and the environment to make a representation of the alignment, right, of what's happening, things. And so that what's, reflected through the materials you're using it's not quite a metaphor because it's a direct relationship, but is a tool to manipulate, and not manipulate in a negative way, but to manipulate these energies, right? These forces, these histories. The other way I think of it is the context is, let's say something has happened in the past. For example, I've worked with clients who, let's say, had like an abortion many, many years ago and didn't really do anything to mark it or, in any kind of ritualized way. Or you've had a separation, let's say a divorce years ago, and there's a lot of acrimony and you never really marked it. So in that way, it's almost like catching up with what actually has happened so that it can be processed, so that it can be marked, so that it can be almost like put back in alignment with life.
Yeah, the way I'm almost visualizing it is like, in the time sense, it's like you are giving people the opportunity to slow down, retrospect in a really deep contemplative way, and kind of bookmark that time in their lives.
Right.
But I don't like divorce or whatever these different things are. I don't hear anyone doing these kind of things. I mean, you might have the rite of passage when you're Jewish, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or if
Right.
you're a Christian, you might have the baptism. But like,
Yep.
these huge transitions, divorce, new job, leaving an old job, starting being an entrepreneur, death of a family member, death of a pet. Like, we don't usually, maybe humans we do, but the death of humans, but we don't really slow down enough to really be with what is arising at the time or present day.
And I think it's true. I think we live at a breakneck speed at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, and we seem to just be speeding up. And so certainly part of this is not just to slow down, but to almost like to find the missing puzzle pieces, right? To be able to put things back in a coherent way that again feels in alignment. I love the word abiding, like the idea of living your life abiding by, let's say, the rhythms of life. And the other piece that we haven't mentioned so far is that a lot of my work, I encourage people to organize gatherings for almost anything that they're going to do, right? So the idea of being witnessed, the idea of community, the idea of having others share stories, right? If you're gonna quit your safe career job and go and launch your thing, what about the idea of organizing even a Zoom gathering with a bunch of friends and having each person going around and sharing the time that they made a huge jump and took a risk? and and it worked out. So that there's that way that, again, when I say alignment, like these stories almost cohere into a momentum, and you feel that support, and you feel that sameness with other people, who've done it, rather than I'm leaving my career, I'm going to do this, ceremony in my bedroom at night. So there's also the power of the collective and the community that, again, most things have been done in community, this kind of work. You don't have a rite of passage by yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like the community offers both witness, but also support and some degree of accountability, depending on what the ritual rite of passage might be.
And then I agree. And then what I'm realizing now is also there's something about modeling, right? These things, because everyone you invite might not themselves have taken part in something like this. So there's also almost the medicine of witnessing others doing this kinds of things, so it becomes more normalized. And so, especially for children, we haven't talked about that, but raising children in a way where they're exposed to ceremony, ritual, and rites of passage, where they think it's normal. And of course, children are born with this capacity, all around the world. If you've ever spent time with a child, they love this stuff, and this is not what we do in school. We don't learn the technologies of ceremony and ritual and how to properly mark, significant. I mean, we have things like graduation, which I just watched my niece's graduation over Zoom from Connecticut, and oh my God, the most boring thing I've sat through in a really long, like there's no soul to it. You know what I mean? I mean, no offense. I know they're trying the best they can, but these are big moments, finishing elementary school, finishing high school, finishing college. And it might need to look different for different people, right? I think there's obviously, you do the commencement ceremony with the whole group, with everyone in your cohort, but for you, something about bringing your family, your friends together, marking this, so it's almost like, it feels like a clean, like a maintenance, It's almost that kind of sense. It's like it's like a cleaning feeling to me, where you kind of like things get put in their proper place, and that allows you to, then do all the other new exciting things in your life. It's almost like being able to file things away in their proper place and time, in a way.
Well, I can imagine just energetically, if you're not spending your time even unconsciously processing things, wondering, fearful, whatever they are, because you've done it consciously with someone like you. You've processed the whole thing, you've bookmarked it, you've learned your lessons, whatever happens to be. I can imagine that you have a lot more energy for other areas of your life anyways, because of that.
Yeah. I can share one of my significant rites of passage that I did several years ago. So when I was a teenager, my first cousin in Greece, my father's nephew, died in a very tragic car accident. He was in his early 20s. And so in Greek culture, we have the belief that if someone dies in like in a tragic way, or some way that doesn't allow them to transition, to completely move on from this plane of existence, that they'll kind of attach themselves to people that they're close to, or people that have a lot of, they say, like light in them. And I wasn't really conscious of it, but I do remember that I found out the day he died, something kind of happened. And looking back, like I understand that he connected to me. We have the same name. His name is Christos as well. And he had stayed with us in our house in Toronto when I was younger. So we had this connection. He was a musician. He's the first one that taught me how to play guitar. And so I went another almost 20 years, really kind of almost carrying him with me. And at some point, I was actually here in Santa Fe working with a friend and elder medicine man. And yeah, we were up late one night, and the room went really cold. And all of a sudden he was like, there's someone else here. I'm not sure, who it is. And just as he said that, I was like, I think it's my cousin. And he said, yeah. And he said, he hasn't transitioned. And he said, you need to go walk the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage, Catholic pilgrimage in Spain. And to release his spirit at the end of the pilgrimage, which is actually like the Atlantic Ocean, the end of the world. It's Finisterre, like end of land, basically, because before Columbus, they understood that this was literally the edge of the world, right? And so, long story short, I ended up flying into Portugal and Porto and doing the Portuguese route, after going to Greece and getting a T-shirt of my cousin's from when he was younger and wearing that every morning. And for 15 days, I walked this pilgrimage, talking with him every morning, especially, just really being with him, but also making clear that like this, this transition needs to happen, right? I can't keep carrying him in this way. And it was, we can go on. It was an incredibly beautiful experience. I got to the edge of the ocean. I burned his shirt. I released his spirit. But
Wow.
what I didn't expect was that for 15 days of, walking 8-9 hours a day, it was incredibly boring. Like I just remember being like, oh my God, this is really boring. But the fact that I had nothing to do other than eat, sleep, shit, and walk, basically, what happened was all these memories were bubbling up. I mean, like random conversations from when I was 10 years old that has no significance, just like, an encounter in the mall when I was 14, songs from kindergarten that I hadn't thought of in 30 years. And it almost felt like just taking all these like documents from my life and filing them away, in their proper sequence, in their proper place. And it really freed up an incredible amount of mental energy and almost like memory space, right? Because now those things have been filed away and now I could actually remember more things, so go ahead.
You're obviously open to the transpersonal, just using the example you just gave, for sure. And I'm wondering, are there spiritual practices that you do or have done over the period of time that allow you to kind of stay open to these channels, this information, so you can download what might be the best thing in conversation with a client, or a ceremony or ritual or whatever?
Like just for my own life, for myself?
Yeah.
I mentioned the pilgrimage, and actually my thing is walking. It has been for a long time. Not whenever, but oftentimes when I need to make a decision, when I need to really ruminate on something, I go for a walk. And when I have a daily walking practice in my life, it's also that, it's obviously much smaller than, walking 15 days straight, but I go for walks. It connects me to where I am in the world, right? Because I've also moved around and travel a lot. And so as soon as I land somewhere, I go for a walk, and that feels like just that slow process of grounding into a place.
Nice.
I get to see the culture, right, around me, wherever I am, even from neighborhood to neighborhood. As you know, cities are different, right? Like one city is not uniformly the same everywhere. And my experience is that when I walk, oftentimes I just channel things. I don't know how to put it. Like knowledge just appears, in my consciousness, and it's not mediated through trees or spirits or anything like that. It's almost like a direct channel to the cosmos. And there's something about movement. I remember years ago reading, I think it was the book Wanderlust by Rebecca Solnit, and she describes, it was somewhere in like Siberia, the Arctic, one of the, far northern tribal peoples, and they have this practice where when they become like white hot angry, like there's just like uncontrollable anger, they'll grab two big sticks, stick one in the ground wherever they are, and then just start walking. And it might be hours, might be days, but they keep walking and walking until the moment, and this is right, like Kairos, or the kairotic moment, right, the appropriate time, until the moment when they feel that the anger has finally dissipated and has now been transmutated into the earth, and then they'll stick the other stick into the ground. And I just remember being moved by that idea of like, if you could, see these two sticks, it's almost like that's the measure of your anger. That's the amount of time and place and energy it took to move through this experience, to be able to process it, to be able to integrate it, right? So for me, there's a big importance to movement. I have tried to be a good meditator, and I'm really horrible at sitting still, right? Like I know it can be good for me, but for me, it's almost like more efficient to move,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that could be a whole other conversation. But I think there's something important about dancing and music and singing, and pilgrimage and these things, and something about making it imprinted in the body. It's a different technology, I'm not putting down meditation or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sitting quietly or sitting
Yeah.
still. But that's my thing. That's what I'm attracted to, and I'm always happy to encourage people to include movement, in whatever they're doing.
I love that. That's great. I'm a big fan as well. Um, Now, when you have clients come to you, walk me through let's walk through two different clients. One who wants to work with you retrospectively. Oh, I did not spend time processing my divorce or the death of a spouse or whatever it happens to be. And give me one example, walk me through prospectively. Like, I know this is going to be happening in the future. I want to create a ceremony or ritual around it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I bring up like what you shared with me once about the dog dish with your dogs?
Sure. Yeah,
Do you want to
sure.
give the context if that's okay?
Oh, like that. I was a nut around that. Yeah. So after Cleona, the bulldog, passed away, transitioned to be with God, we had dishes for her and we had dishes for Joshua, our other dog. And for months I was a nut and I would not let us use Cleona, the bulldog's dishes for Joshua. It's like I kept them separate. And it wasn't like I thought through it in any depth, but it's like I just felt really uncomfortable with the thought of doing that. That's the
Yeah.
background. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we haven't worked together in that way, but if that was, for example, a case that we wanted to work through, like when you shared that with me a few weeks ago, I was really moved as I responded to you, because there's something really significant about that intelligence, right? That is like, on the one hand, you can be rational, you can be like, again, almost linear time, be like, oh, it's just a freaking, dog dish. But like, there's this other intelligence that's saying like, it's not time yet, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to move on. And so, initially it would be a conversation or conversations, and really supporting the person to touch into that intelligence that you're talking about, right? Because it sounds like even like for you, there can be almost like what am I doing? Like this, it's just a dog dish, and we can kind of try to rationalize or dismiss that instinct, that intelligence, right? Which I would say is Kairos. Um, and to tune into that. And one thing that's important to me is, I lived in the UK for years, and I think it was there that I learned the word bespoke, and I don't think it's
Mm.
used over here in America very much. So bespoke is like, it's unique. It's like it's tailor made. It's made just for you, for something. And so for me, it's not that I'm like prescribing, okay, here, Michael, you know, do this, this, and this. It's like, how do I support you to tune into that intelligence? And I think from that intelligence, there's always an incredible sense of creativity that's actually underlying it, right? And so once we start asking the right questions and talking about, other things that are coming up, for example, that might look like you need to gather friends, people that knew Cleona, and share the stories, share, some of what you've shared with me of trips and things like that, to be able to, even just as I'm saying this, I feel emotion around it, because there's something about doing this with people, right?
Yeah.
And being witnessed and having maybe other people get also share their stories of, a dog that died, right? And there's something about that way that things cohere, that hopefully, and it's not to say, okay, this is what's going to happen, but something about being with not just the grief, but the praising, of that life, of
Yeah.
that relationship,
Mm.
that then allows hopefully, to be like, okay, I can, that's now in its appropriate place. And now I can be with, my other dog in a full way, right? And I'm not carrying this other thing that has now ended, right? So it's something about recognizing the natural end of things, which again, man, in this culture, we're just not that great with.
Yeah.
Whether that's, any kind of loss of career, divorce, loss of home, even just, loss of identity. We were a lifelong progressive, and now that just doesn't fit for us anymore. And now, we need to mark the end of that. So there's something about properly closing things so that there's space and energy for whatever's next coming in, right? So that would be the kind of looking back. Going forward, I remember when my former partner and I were about to head out into the unknown in the middle of COVID in our new Airstream trailer, and literally going to launch into just North America, not knowing where we are going to land or what was going to be home. We had lost our home. And some people that you and I mutually know organized a gathering again on Zoom for us. And we spent probably 2 hours, people sharing their stories of taking a big risk, whether it's a risk on a relationship, whether home, whether leaving a career or something. Incredible amount of tears, all kinds of laughter. And it's just like, it gives you strength. There's something about, having that. And then the next morning we got, in our vehicle and drove away. And there's something that carried us, that was with us. That's different from, I don't know, a Facebook post. People are like, good luck, Christos. There's something about people taking the time. And I will say that it seemed to me that everyone who attended that gathering got just as much as we did from that, right? So there's a way of like spreading out that experience so it's even more impactful, and then it's not only about you.
Yeah, I love how you weave in the community aspects of it. And I'm reminded of the very beginning of this conversation. You said, the good, the true, the beautiful. Where you said the beautiful and the good. Very Greek of you, of course. And I'm curious for you, like, how do you integrate into this work with people, whether they're retrospective or prospective, the beauty?
Well, it's almost like, when you put it that way, I'm almost like, well, what is beauty, right? Like, what is it? We have this word for this thing. Right now, I'm here in New Mexico where we've had the worst forest fires in state history, and it's been raining all week, and everyone is just so moved by just rain, right? Even right now, I can just hear it. And in this context, there's something so beautiful about, the haziness and the mist. And part of it is just that I know that life is being nourished, right? So there's something about observing life doing its thing so that life may continue. But what I'm actually thinking of when I say that it's a mystery is, if anyone wants to, they can go on YouTube, and if you do a search for chimpanzee waterfall dance, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. I believe that this Jane Goodall kind of comments on it. It's a short, maybe like a 4-minute video, and it's this large male chimpanzee, and he's being filmed, and he's by himself next to this waterfall in this little pool of water. And this has been observed, several times in the wild. And he's gesticulating, he's like slapping at the water, he's dancing around, he's spinning, he's screaming, right? He's jumping up and down. He's like putting his head in his hands into the waterfall and back. And he's just like, for many minutes, he's just kind of doing all this stuff. And then at the end of it, he just literally sits and he just contemplates the waterfall. And the argument made in the video, which I agree with, which is like, this is the roots of spirituality, right? This predates humans, and it's outside of just the human species. So my sense of beauty is that it's you're so moved and in awe at life itself that you can't contain it just in your body, and you need to, to get it out, to get it expressed in some way, not only to reflect it back, but because you can't hold it all, right? I mean, we know that feeling. That's why, like, tears come out. That's why, like shouts, whoops of joy come out when we're really, really moved by something. It's something very animal-like that I think is
very primal,
on some level, probably shared by all beings in their own way, right? And so for me, beauty is, it's almost like closing the loop. We're given this majestical universe, and then we're so moved by it that we need to gesticulate and do something to return that energy back, you know? So it's kind of like this cycle of awe, I would say, you know?
I imagine people could be moved by your way of approaching life, not just like, oh, let's do a ceremony around a loss or a new job, you know, around very particular events, transitional events in one's life. But I could imagine too, just listening to you could almost reflect on your day-to-day life and begin to ritualize and ceremonialize activities of daily life. You don't have to wait till like a big event, transitional events. Just eating could be a ritual for one.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that, you know, we can work with is not only like a one-time event, but like, yeah, what's going to be your morning ritual every day, right? Your evening ritual, or your, you know, God, your ritual with your partner, with your children, right? Like the domesticity with your coworkers. I mean, I haven't yet, but I would love to work actually with businesses and organizations, because it's just so powerful when you have some kind of, you know, shared ritual. You know, I think the closest thing we usually have is like, you know, the birthday cake and happy birthday for Kathy's, you know, 40th birthday, whatever kind of thing. And we've done it a million times, and it's sweet to acknowledge someone, but, you know, I mean, there's just so much more we could be doing in this way, right? We could imagine if every quarterly report had something that was like, you know, remembering the mission of the company, right? And not critiquing or not saying, what do we do right or wrong, but just being like, we show up for work every day, you know, for whatever reason. You know, part of it is to get paid, but obviously it's not just about the cash, right? To some degree, we're consenting to being all together and working on this project together, whatever it is, you know, whether it's 2 employees or 200. And it also doesn't have to, you know, like you mentioned earlier about, you know, bar mitzvahs or baptisms, and this is obviously what is the basis of religions for the most part, right? Is these kinds of rituals and ceremonies. But unfortunately, they became universalized, right? And just kind of plopped, you know, everywhere you are at, I don't know, in Catholicism, is it 10 or 12 years old, I think, is first communion, you know, these kinds of things. And it's powerful. I'm not putting these down. Like, at least it's something. But for many of us who don't practice, you know, a traditional faith and still need ritual and ceremony in our lives, we can create new things. You know, we can tap into historic things. Like there's like the palette is endless almost, right? But the important is actually doing these things, integrating things into our lives. Because I think that's where meaning comes from, it seems to me, you know, like.
Yeah, I love the distinction between the 3 types of time, and Kairos is the one that drives your work. And then that, you know, you bring in communitas, or community is so important. So it's not just the individual. And I could imagine an individual might want to have a ritual or ceremony just with them. I'm sure that's fine. But I love the idea of like, oh, let's make this a community, because you other people can bear witness to you. You bear witness to them, and it sounds can be quite inspirational. Like, you know, I was moved by your story, and I was moved by your story too. And, you know, as you share those stories and develop a community. And I could imagine too that there could be practices which could emerge from these community events that people bring into their daily life or their quarterly life too.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, I'd love this kind of work to spread, not just through what I'm doing, but, you know, just more and more. And I think it is. I think people are realizing, I forget the name of it. There's a big movement now that I came across when I was living in England, of people that basically don't want the religion, but want the community, right? I presume there's something similar in Judaism and maybe even Islam, you know, where it's like, you want the songs, you want the community, you want the regularity, right? But you maybe don't necessarily, you can't believe in maybe the more supernatural presets of the faith, for example, right? Because, you know, for most of our ancestors, this was the root of life. This was the scaffolding, right, of your entire, from, you know, from cradle to grave, was structured around all, not just coming of age rituals, but, all these kinds of things. And this is what not only gives your life meaning, but also, again, places you in a community, places you in a place, right? Because all these things have to happen somewhere, right? And so, I remember I had some friends gather for me for my 40th birthday in the Highlands of Scotland, and we did a ceremony next to, it's again a waterfall, and apparently this is a waterfall that back, I don't know, man, 800 years back when Christianity was first coming to that parts of Scotland, that was used for baptisms, and it's been used for baptisms for maybe 800 years. This beautiful spot. And there was something significant for me about my 40th birthday, and we gathered, and I haven't been back to that spot since, but like that place for the rest of my life will have this incredible significance, right? And beauty, and that memory of, the 6 close friends that, 2 of them flew over from Canada, for God's sake,
Nice.
It's a significant place in the world for me now, and I think the more that we have places on the earth that we've inhabited in these meaningful ways, it's almost like the more that the earth becomes this place that's, infused with significance and moments, and, whether it's a city or nature, like by using these technologies, I think like it creates places that our soul is now connected to, as opposed to feeling like we're just kind of, transiting through life without much of a connection to any particular place.
I love that. I love the kind of eco perspective. It's not just interpersonal between us and our tribe, or us and ourselves, but also us and our ecology as well. Various natural systems and even human systems.
Right. And I'm just saying that, I'm thinking, oh, of course, like, like significant trees. I remember living in Devon, England, near the Darting tree, about 800 years old, and there's a little cemetery, and there's one massive yew tree, which, must be at least 1,000 years old, possibly more, that people just come to, right? You see little trinkets, little offerings all the time, and the branches at the root of the trunk. And, think of it that way. Like, it's not just the human realm, but like these places of significance, a lake, a river, right? A tree, all these kinds of things, a mountain, And so again, it's another way of also binding us to place and to these other beings that have significance. And, that's, I think of baptism, right? Is it the River Jordan that originally was used? Like, I mean, there's something about,
I believe so, right?
right? Like that place, like we still sing songs about, the River Jordan, where people went for this, rite of passage, just purification, this idea of being reborn and going into the depths of the water and re-emerging. And it's an actual freaking river in the world that you can actually go visit, right? And people do. That's why these places have such significance. Jerusalem, the temple, like these are places that have been reactivated over and over and over and over for thousands of years, right? And they have this energy, they have this power, and these are these technologies, and obviously they are meaningful to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be even fighting these wars over these places, because, right, if a place is just a place and nothing really matters, everything's just atoms floating around, then we wouldn't react in this way to these places. So,
right,
good point. Despite all the tragedy there's something significant about how many times our ancestors have tapped into the chaotic, tapped into ceremony in these particular places, that makes them stand out as places of power.
Speaking of Kairos, where can people learn more about your offering, your website, and your work?
Yeah, so christosgalanis.com is my main website, and off of there's a page for Kairos, and I have a mailing list on there. You can sign up, you can contact me directly, and we can work together. I also just offer 15-minute free consultation if people just want to, check in and be like, they can be like, I had this divorce 3 years ago, but I'm not really sure if it's the time. Right. And so there's no pressure, no expectation. We can talk about it, and maybe you might realize, I'm not ready yet. And that's totally fine. And if not,
that's okay too.
So, and also Facebook, I'm pretty active on there. That's the one social media platform I have. Again, just Christos Galanis, and I share.
Make sure to include the links to your website and to your Facebook. And Christos, great to see you. Congratulations on the launch, and look forward to hearing the success of it. Because as you and I talked offline, we unfortunately here in the West, especially the United States, don't have rites of passage. We have very little ritual, very little ceremony. Most of it that we do have is very surface level stuff. So I'm hoping to hear soon that your message is spread and people are kind of waking up to the sacredness of everyday lives and transitions and stuff. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Michael, and thank you so much for your care and support with me over the past year and a half or so, working together, and your advice. And yeah, I will say that the seed from this, if you remember, came from that conversation. I remember at one point you asked me, how can animism kind of apply to to other people and help, and that kind of is what launched that little seed, that thread of like thinking about, okay, how can I do more than just teaching about animism? How can I actually implement this more into people's lives? So huge gratitude to you for the right questions.
That's awesome.
All right,
You're very welcome, Christos. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There's nothing in between you and me. Nothing in between blue and sea. Nothing in between us and love. Nothing in between when